Canada's official poverty rate does not reveal the full extent of food insecurity in this country. That's according to a new report published by Food Banks Canada, shedding light on a widely used European metric known as the Material Deprivation Index. Joining us to discuss their findings is Food Banks Canada's Director of Research, Richard Matten. Richard, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a concerning new look at just how many Canadians are struggling, because your report has found actually 1 in 4 people are living in poverty. That's much higher than the 10% that Stats Can says. So, explain for us, what does it mean to be living in hidden poverty?
So the measure that we use is called Material Deprivation Index, as you mentioned. And what this is a list of, in this case, of 11 items that the majority of Canadians deem essential for a standard of living in Canada. And with the survey we did, we found that 25% of the country were missing 2 or more of these items. And these items can include things like being able to get around your community, being able to buy a gift for a child for their birthday, being able to afford clothes for job interviews. Those were the types of questions in this list. And those who said that they couldn't afford 2 or more, according to this measure, appear to be very likely living at a poverty level living standard.
So how do you measure this, though? Because the report says assessing poverty goes beyond income. Can you explain that?
So income is very important, but one of many different inputs into a standard of living of a household. So the current poverty measure that's used by Stats Can, which is the MBM, was a very important step in a definition of poverty to help monitor a poverty reduction strategy. To add to this, what we're looking at, though, with this measure is what people can actually afford with the income they have. And there's different things that can impact people's standard of living besides their income, like for if they have a certain amount of debt, or on the other hand, if they have assets, if they have a disability and that requires more costs to meet those needs, or if they've been living in a particular rental unit for a long time and the rent is lower than average, or if they've just moved and they're paying higher than average rent, which is the case for many in the city right now, as you can imagine. All those things, and there's many different reasons why people, even though they might have the same income or below a certain threshold, do not have enough money to afford the items they need.
Is this perhaps why, because we've been hearing in the news quite recently about how so many more people need to rely on food banks, and is this perhaps why we're seeing people with full-time jobs, still need to access those resources?
Well, indeed. So according to this measure, for instance, the Material Deprivation Index, the majority of those living in poverty, according to the MDI, are working. But many of the poverty reduction programs that exist right now don't necessarily target people who are working. And that's why part of the intent of this measure is to look at creating programs that assist those who are also in the workforce. So that includes universal drug and dental support, extended threshold eligibility. So people who might be technically over the poverty line, as many who are working are, but still can't afford the essentials, could be eligible for them. And that's what we're seeing essentially at food banks, is we've seen an increase of people who are working because they've seen their purchasing power in particular decrease so substantially in the last few years due to inflation.
Okay. Richard, very quickly, I have about a minute here. Is there anything in the report that surprises you or stands out?
Just the degree that we're seeing of poverty, or the poverty level living standard that might be apparent in a quarter of the population. So that's key, is that if you see and define this level of poverty, and it can be a complement to existing poverty measures, then the two together can help us really design and monitor how we're tracking on our poverty reduction progress and make some real differences.
Richard Matten with Food Banks Canada, thank you so much for your insight and for joining us. It is 7:36 here on BT. Frank Ferragini is standing by. He has a look at your forecast.